to the Cattle USA podcast for the second time officially, but
Thank you.
third
I think
time.
so.
I don't know. I've put so many of our episodes on here. I have no idea how it even works anymore. But for all of you listeners out there, as you can see, Paige and I are in person. This is our first in-person guest episode. I'm feeling so official.
Yeah, I love it.
In our hotel room in Kansas City right now. Yep. Just making the most out of this situation. Our mic is currently being held up by a high heel. The computer is on 2 pillows. We have our lights, camera, action all over the place. But, we're making the most of it.
We are. We're doing what we can.
Exactly. So. Absolutely. Paige and I were looking at our schedules to get some of these podcasts recorded. And we were like, when do we have time? That's a great question. I'm not sure. And then we realized we were both in Kansas City together for a Carl event this week. And we're like, hey, we have 30 minutes one of the evenings. Let's just do it and record some podcasts. So here we are.
Absolutely.
Here we are, and we're going to be talking estate planning today.
Yes.
I'm very excited. So to just kind of introduce estate planning to people, all of the things like that. First and foremost, why is it so important, especially for rural families, people in agriculture, rural America? Why do we need to give a crap about estate planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So estate planning is really about protecting the people and the operations that you love. In rural America, especially for farming and ranching families, it's not just about passing down a house and a couple of savings accounts. It's about passing down the land, cattle, equipment, and everything that you have built with your own hands, literally. So, and the reality is, if you don't make a plan, the law will make one for you, and it's probably not going to be the same type of plan that you would have wanted. So, for example, land is typically the biggest asset, and it's a necessity in ag operations. If you don't have the land, you literally cannot do the work. So having to split up that land equally instead of favoring the farming or ranching kid can set your family's operation back. But if you want to split everything equally between farming and non-farming heirs, that's your choice, but that's your estate plan. So that's the difference between being able, one difference and one example between planning that out yourself and having the law plan that out for you.
Absolutely. Can you share just some of the biggest risks that you've encountered working with a lot of these rural families? This is what you specialize in. This is what you as an attorney love to do and really focus on in your community. Can you just share a little bit more about the biggest risks that someone is going to face if they don't have a plan in place?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest risks of not having a plan is having to navigate probate and potentially a forced sale. So if you pass away without a plan, your property gets divided according to state law. And that often forces families to sell the land, cattle, or equipment and split everything up. So I had one family where 2 kids wanted to keep ranching, but the third moved to the city and because he needed cash. And so without planning, they would have been forced to sell part of the home place just to pay that sibling out. But thankfully we got ahead of it. We had a plan and we were able to treat all 3 kids as fairly as possible and kind of give the 2 farming kids a little bit of a step up while still treating that non-farming kid equally, giving him some cash. And, he was living his life in the city and he was loving it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we wanted to make sure that we could keep the land for the other 2 sons to continue doing their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people might think that estate planning is just for the wealthy or for folks nearing retirement, but that is absolutely not the case. What would you say in response to that, especially for our younger audience, people that are our age in their 20s and looking at something like an estate plan, or even people that are our age and they're starting to have these conversations with their parents who are maybe only in their 50s, maybe 60s, or maybe even their 40s still. Why estate planning is so important for people of all age groups, and then that it's not just for the wealthy as well.
Yes. So I hear these myths all the time, and that is one of the most dangerous myths out there. Estate planning isn't about how much money you have or how old you are. It's about control. So if you own cattle, land, equipment, or if you simply care about what happens to your family after you die, you need a plan. So I've worked with folks in their 20s just getting started, and I've worked with 80-year-olds setting up trust for their grandkids. It's never too early and it's never too late, but the earlier you start, the better plan you could have in place. Typically, when I have people come in when they're about our age and just getting married and just having kids, I say, let's set up a simple will. Let's make sure the kids are protected. Let's make sure you're protected and your family's protected if something were to happen to your spouse or yourself, and then come back in 10, 15 years when you have more assets, when you've started a business, when you've saved some more money, and we'll set up a trust or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. It is just so important that people, I think, realize and grasp that this is important at all stages of the game. And it's going to develop as time goes. You're maybe going to need to start with a will when you're in your 20s, but then by the time you're in your 30s, it looks very different. And a will just is simply not going to cover it anymore.
Exactly.
And a trust and estate plan is definitely the way to go. But with all of this, it feels very overwhelming, right? Like you and I have talked about this multiple times at this point. So I feel like I am just kind of by association a pro at talking about estate planning and like
you really are.
and its importance and all of the things like that. But when you first start out, it can be like, oh my gosh, I have a to-do list that is 1,000,000 miles long right now. I don't know what any of these words mean. It can just all feel very overwhelming. What is kind of your response to that, and just your thoughts on that for the listeners and people out there?
Yeah, it typically is overwhelming starting out. I have a client intake form, so if you email me, call me, the first thing I'm going to do is send you this client intake form to get some more information about you, learn kind of what your family situation is, what your financial situation is, and the intake form, although it's only 3 pages long, big font, it can be very overwhelming because it's asking for some specific information. But I find that after people kind of get all of this information together, bank accounts, retirement accounts, investment accounts, insurance plans, once you have all of that together, you just automatically kind of feel a weight lifted off of your shoulders because you see all of the information and it's organized. And so that's something that I really try to prioritize, because I've noticed that when clients come in, they often seem very stressed and overwhelmed and frantic. And so I try to do the best that I can to not only help people through this process, guide them through this process, but also help them organize their information so that they feel like their life is in order, and educate them through the process so that they know exactly what they're signing, and they know exactly how everything is going to work after they pass away.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things that so little in our life do we sit down and actually like put all of our accounts, put everything together. And I know my husband and I were doing it recently, and it's like it makes you feel like you're in control of it, right?
Yes,
because you're
absolutely.
actually like sitting down, seeing where everything is, what everything looks like, where your numbers are at. And so often we just like to sit in this place of like, I don't know, or I'll deal with it later because it's too stressful, or it feels overwhelming, or it's just not the right time. And you know what? The reality of it is, it's really never the right time, because we're either calving, or we're spring processing, or we're doing summer things around the ranch, or then it's fall calving season. And like there's always an excuse, right? We're always busy. There's always an excuse not to do it, just to keep pushing it off. But this is one of those things that it's like you'd rather have it and not need it than not have it and need it, because you just discussed all of the reasons of why you need it. Like, you don't want to get stuck in probate. You really don't want to spend the money that it costs to get out of probate. You don't want to have to put your ranching operation on pause. You don't want to have to do all of these things that, while you're also grieving the loss of someone really important in your life, also having to deal with all the legalities of it, right? This trust is, estate planning is a way of preparing that next generation for taking over, but also a way of like allowing your family to process and grieve and have control and knowledge over the situation, because knowledge is power. And so if you're sitting in a situation and you're feeling overwhelmed and just like you don't have control over it, this is a really great way to slowly but surely start taking control. And I think another important thing is, this isn't going to be an overnight situation. It takes time to sit down and estate plan with your family and get legal help with it and consult an attorney and all of those things. But it's something that can be done slowly. But I think the first most important step is just starting, right?
Absolutely.
You need to sit down it's going to take maybe a week to get all of your bank accounts and retirement accounts and all of that stuff put together. But once you start that process, it just makes you feel like you're in so much more control.
Absolutely. You're exactly right.
So Paige, as we kind of start to round out this specific episode about estate planning, I know we're going to be doing a bunch more about this, and specifically today, we're going to be recording a bunch more that we're going to be putting out over the next few weeks. But do you have any final tidbits of advice as people are walking through this about estate planning just in general?
Absolutely. So the best way to think about it is you need to craft your estate plan as if something were to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. If you were to die tomorrow, how would you want your assets distributed? And more importantly, you don't have to know everything when you walk into that first meeting with your attorney or your consultant. Whoever you work with is going to ask you those guiding questions and offer you different options to help you figure it out. Good estate planning is about sitting down, talking about your goals, and putting it together piece by piece. It's not a one-size-fits-all process, and honestly, not making a decision is still making a decision, as you mentioned earlier. Yes. I had a ranching family who came in a couple weeks ago after putting it off years and years, and they said that it felt overwhelming because their kids were in high school and their kids weren't necessarily in a situation. If something were to happen to the parents, they said, I don't know if my high schoolers can handle our operation. And in truth, they probably couldn't at that age. But still, that's a risk that you have to be, that you're taking, not making a plan in that situation is still making a plan. So they didn't know if they could handle running the operation if something were to happen to the parents, understandably so. But they still came in and we put a plan in place so that it would be a neighbor and a grandpa coming to help out. And, in those situations, you can't put it off just because you don't think your kids would be ready to take over the ranch. If something were to happen to you, and you don't have an estate plan in place, if your kids are in high school, that's probably the worst thing that can happen to them. So, you have to plan as if you were to die tomorrow, and just take the first step to make that meeting, because whoever you're working with is going to guide you along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can just say from personal experience, working through this process with my family and everything like that, that it is so important to have someone by your side who is a professional and really knows what they're doing and can help guide you, because these are really uncomfortable conversations for a lot of people.
They are.
It's not fun to talk about dying. No. It's not fun to talk about the idea of you not being here anymore, right? Mm-hmm. But like we said earlier, having a plan is power behind it. And like you said just now, not planning is also planning.
Yep.
Like, by not putting a plan together, you're also just planning to fail in the sense of it, right? Yep. You're letting your ranching operation or your farming operation fail by not planning. Mm-hmm. And so it is so important to just start that process and just take that first step, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Maybe that first step is contacting an attorney. Maybe that first step is having a really uncomfortable conversation with your spouse, or maybe that first step is having a really uncomfortable conversation with kids. But it is so important to just take that first step and start this process forward. So as we close out the podcast, I want to let all of you guys know that have listened to us today that wonderful Paige over here does do a weekly feature on the Cattle USA Drive newsletter. So if you guys want more of that, make sure you check out the show notes, subscribe to that newsletter, and Paige's, all of her information that she puts out on there. I'm going to have Paige's website linked down below that has your blog and your contact info, her contact info for Kennedy Berkeley, if there's anyone in the state or region that is looking for some legal help as far as estate planning goes. That way you guys can reach out to her directly. Trust me, she's amazing to work with. And all of the things like that. And you can get just some advice, reach out to her team, all of that information for you guys. So I will have all of that linked down below for everyone listening. And as always, thank you for listening to another episode of the Cattle USA Daily Podcast. And we will catch you all next time on the next episode that we have Paige on, which honestly might be tomorrow. Honestly, we might have 2 Paige podcasts go up in a row, but you guys just get spoiled with it. So we will see you all next time. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review. And if your first step today, it might just be sharing this episode with a spouse, a friend, a family member, whoever that may be, to start that first step too. So we will see you all next time on another episode, and I hope you all have have a great rest of your day. We'll see ya.